You remember that one generic harem trash anime you dropped halfway through cause it sucked so bad? Not these. This one. A Certain Magical Index. I'm going to do my best to convince you that this series is actually a masterpiece, and nah, screw it, it's mid. The anime at least. The light novels though, my god. Well, that's another story entirely. Listen, I understand you probably think I'm talking out my ass. Not only was A Certain Magical Index the best-selling light novel franchise of all time in Japan, it makes One Piece look short, and has one of the most dynamic and exciting worlds in all of weeb media. It's a very long-running series, with it now in its third part as of when this video was recorded, and Index has inspired many side stories and spin-offs such as A Certain Scientific Railgun, A Certain Scientific Accelerator, Dark Matter, Mental Out, yada yada, you get the idea, focusing on a different character or aspect of this giant world. The story of Index takes place in a parallel universe very similar to the modern world we live in, with two big exceptions. All the European churches are secretly run by religious nutjobs, I mean magicians, with different mythologies acting as the basis for magic as a power. There's also Academy City, a city-state walled off from the rest of Tokyo to keep those pesky magicians out. The city is a pure advocate of science, with no religion involved, which is why it is a paradise for fedora-wearing neckbeards. Academy City is considered a superpower despite its small size, boasting advanced technology and weapons 20 to 30 years ahead of the rest of the world, and home to the Power Curriculum program, where you too can send your beloved son or daughter to be drugged like a lab rat, abused by not-so-shady scientists, in a city that gets attacked every other day, and that's all in the hope your kid might develop psychic powers, making them an Esper. While the two sides of the world are separate from one another, it doesn't stop a bunch of Anglican magicians entering the home of science. One of them is a nun called Index, who just so happens to land on the balcony of the unlucky level 0 Esper, who ends up trying to defend her from the church, who wish to erase her memory. This is despite having no psychic ability of his own, but he does possess a power that is distinct from both magic and science, that being Imagine Breaker, the power in his right hand to nullify any supernatural ability from either side. Trying to explain Index briefly seems like an impossible task, but hopefully that gives you an image of what the series is all about. I'm going to talk about each component of the light novel to illustrate why Index is a blessing from heaven, and you should at least give it a chance. It's got the holy gospel vibes for a reason. I'm gonna say it dead straight. The world building and lore of Index is some of the best I've ever read in fiction. Period. Academy City is one of the most detailed, vibrant, and stylistic locations I've come across. The reason for this is probably because it does feel like a place that could actually exist in our own world as technology becomes ever more advanced, minus the quantum physics warping X-Men wannabes that will probably never happen in the real world. The futuristic scientific advancements are apparent, from the wind turbines, cleaning robots, and strange juices. As Academy City's population is dominated by students, comprising 80% of those who live there, you may think, having that many superpowered kids around would be an absolute disaster for the city's infrastructure. Not to worry, the adults are there to do all the jobs the kids can't. Plus there's anti-skill, volunteers from the city's teachers who act as both Academy City's military and as an anti-Esper police force that deal with the most serious incidents. But surely there isn't enough volunteers amongst low-paid teachers who hate their lives. That's why there's Judgment, the other side of Academy City's police force, this time composed of student volunteers who are Espers and use their powers to help solve problems and apprehend criminals. The city also has its own unique set of rules, such as the curfew, where students are not allowed outdoors late at night. Academy City feels like a functioning society with so many different aspects to it, despite its futuristic feel. And yet, it doesn't come across as distorted by all these wacky attributes that it has, becoming a completely alien environment. It still feels like a grounded place where students could live their lives and exist, despite all the insanity that occurs there, which is remarkable. I suppose when it's modelled off a real city in Greater Tokyo, that certainly helps. There's all the different districts of Academy City, with each one having its own distinct theme, like the airport and space district, the amusement park district, the district where all the college students go, etc. It helps knowing that each part of the city has its own unique identity and purpose, rather than just being a random space where people live, I guess, which would be the standard approach. The fact that it's similar to real-life cities such as London, which has its different boroughs and areas, where you get a sense of a distinct identity and attributes they are known for, makes Academy City feel a lot more genuine in nature. There is also the two opposing sides of the city, the light side and the dark side. This isn't Star Wars, by the way. The light side is how the city is viewed at the surface level, and is pretty much the norm for most students. You know, going to class, hanging out after school, kids being kids, yada yada. It almost acts as the facade in regards for what is the true nature of the city, which might as well be the dark side, which is where the fun begins. The deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the worse it gets. From the standard skill out thugs on the street who want to beat espers up simply because they have no powers and are jealous of them, to the crazy scientists with the messed up experiments who want to nuke the world in the name of science. That sounds completely rational. And then you have the many factions who just want to kill each other for the hell of it. Usually the worst Darkside members tend to avoid getting innocent civilians involved to avoid potential consequences, which is why the city is still operating despite all the messed up stuff behind the scenes. But still, that doesn't always stop students from the light side going missing or getting too involved with people they shouldn't be talking to. A Certain Magical Index isn't just Academy City alone. There are arcs where characters get to explore the world outside the walls, which usually means magic is not too far away. With the exception of some important individuals outside the magic side, the fact that magic actually exists is kept secret from outsiders, as opposed to Esper powers that have been normalized as the natural evolution of science, mainly thanks to Aleister. So while the Roman Catholic Church, Anglican Church, and Russian Orthodox Church all exist out in the public, the fact they go around shooting fire, lightning, and other crap at each other isn't. Also, the political power of the churches seems to be a lot stronger than it is in our world in the present, due to the diplomatic influence the church can have over entire nation states. If we take the UK as an example, the Anglican Church acts as one of the three pillars of the nation, along with the Knights and the British royal family. But at the same time, they have a government with no affiliation or ties to magic whatsoever. And it's not just churches that form the magic side, with different pagan cults, magic cabals, and other religions all belonging to the overarching magic side, despite these factions often having very different beliefs about the world itself and coming into conflict with one another. I guess you could say the science side is a lot more united than the magic side. The many magic factions aren't as fleshed out and developed as Academy City, mainly because there's a lot more of them and Academy City is the main setting of Index. But it might be also because the story is from the perspective of the science side, therefore keeping the magic side of the world mysterious and slowly teasing the reader with more and more information about what magic is and how this secretive world operates was likely an intentional decision. That's why I don't like it when people neglect the world building of the magic side, simply because it's not really a thing in a Certain Scientific Railgun, which is ironically more popular than Index despite it being a spin-off of Index. And due to this narrative of Academy City being really cool, which which it is, but the magic side being boring and not as compelling grossly undermines the importance of the other half of the Index universe. The magic side has existed for centuries, if not for thousands of years, in different forms in the Index lore. When compared to the modern science side, with the birth of Academy City, which only came to exist after the end of World War II, which makes it approximately 70, 80 years old, where Index takes place in this parallel universe. Literally, Academy City couldn't exist without the magic side, as it was made in response to it. What makes the world building truly special is how the two sides interconnect and differ from one another. It's obvious how they contrast, as you have the establishment versus the rebel, the old versus the new, magic versus science, religion versus atheism, etc. I feel it adds a lot of depth to the overall themes of the story, which I will get around to later. There is a distinct culture within Academy City itself that separates it from religion, with it being quite a materialistic society, where one's worth is judged by your own power level, and that religions are not worshipped, but instead analysed in a very pragmatic manner, where superstitions are discouraged. Which is ironic considering how characters like Toma complain about having bad luck all the time. Academy City was founded by the world's greatest magician, Aleister Crowley, who betrayed magic for the pursuit of science. The city is heavily influenced by magical concepts that are not immediately obvious, like Academy City's true form being a massive temple that is used to summon scientific angels. Part of the mystery and intrigue of the series is understanding these concepts and how they blur together right under the reader's noses. The tagline of the series is, "Where magic and science collide, the story begins." And truly the story does become a lot more engaging when you do appreciate the lore and history of both sides and how they mutually coexist while at the same time being destined to clash with one another in the end. There is so much nuance and depth to their relationship that's going to take this entire video to hopefully fully convey. Not gonna lie, the plot of Index in the anime feels impossible to understand unless you have some kind of OCD. The characters feel like they give half-assed explanations for what the hell is going on, and with the pacing being horrendous at times, blink for 1 second and you probably miss some important plot details. So you can imagine my shock when I first read the novel, where suddenly the penny dropped, and not only did I get how one event led to the other, but also I was appreciating almost every story arc. Even the magic side ones I thought were terrible in the anime. But I must give you a severe warning. If you hate large amounts of build-up, Index might not be for you. But hold on a sec, let me explain. Essentially, the first half of the original Index light novel has quite an episodic approach to its overall narrative, meaning you could pick up any of these books and have a pretty decent understanding of what's going on and enjoy it as a self-contained story. Index then shifts to a more overarching narrative around volume 12, where the villainous magic side faction known as God's Right Seat are introduced. That doesn't necessarily mean the earlier volumes are bad per se. I just compare it more to the storytelling structure of, let's say, a Cowboy Bebop or early JoJo Stardust Crusaders. These arcs are also super important despite having a quite repetitive formula of Toma having to defeat the bad guy of the week while also usually saving a girl. Typical. They absolutely serve a purpose with each new character, and plot thread is introduced as at least one aspect from the previous volumes is interwoven into the final arc of the original light novel, that being the World War III arc. To achieve this when writing a story with so many characters and arcs going on is nothing short of impressive. The early arcs show how World War III edges ever closer as tensions between Academy City and the Roman Catholic Church eventually get to a breaking point, and Toma is essentially used as a tool by Aleister to slowly edge the world towards a war in his plot to eventually destroy magic as a whole. With plenty of plot twists and mind games thrown in, in as the backdrop to the cool magic and science dynamic. It really keeps the story engaging. As yeah, politics isn't exactly the most exciting thing for the average weeb, but since Index's politics is more about avoiding and starting a war, and is kept in the background of the story, it doesn't become boring to me at least. I think it's honestly fascinating that Toma is just an average level 0 Esper whose simple actions, such as punching bad guys or saving the day, has far greater implications in the overall world, as the magic side realise that Toma is basically being used as a weapon against them. Then you get to the second half of Old Testament, where the story really starts to shine, as the stakes are drastically raised, as World War III now becomes inevitable, as God's right seat attempts to instigate it by provoking their allies and enemies. Academy City also becomes an even more dangerous place, as the different dark side groups start their own conflict with one another for their own political agendas or simply to protect the ones they love. What I appreciate about Index is that it has so many different story beats and aspects in the world that all seem to fit within it, due to how layered the universe and story is. While Index could be classed as a battle shonen, I honestly think it has a solid mystery vibe running through it, which makes the atmosphere unique, as we the audience slowly unravel secrets about the world or the true intentions behind the actions of certain characters. Index is not a typical battle shonen series in my opinion. For example, the dark side arcs feel like mafia or gangster stories with superpowers. You can also get volumes with a heavier focus on slice of life, exploring quirky and entertaining character interactions, and then of course you do get the more battle shonen type volumes which explore clashing morals between characters. And that's just a few examples. Literally having so many plot elements and making them all feel natural in the story is not an easy task, and yet Index manages to do it seamlessly. Since Index is so diverse, I think the variety of genres and subgenres you can integrate into Index's formula is limitless. That's why Index often feels like more than just a story to me, and how all these factors converge into one at the end, where we see characters reach resolutions and the many volumes of build-up reaches its peak. The payoff absolutely delivers, and it's so satisfying to witness. The sequel light novel series known as New Testament has a more clear direction of where the story was heading with less build-up, but still it has more climactic arcs which probably outshine even the heights of Old Testament, such as the Ophanus and Choronzon arcs. Despite this, overall, Old Testament is probably the more consistent in its quality as a whole, while New Testament is arguably the more volatile with the highest highs and the lowest lows. Nevertheless, I'm such an Index shill that I can even find value from the worst volumes of Index, because I appreciate it when the author Kamachi Kazuma likes to experiment in the story by introducing new concepts. As yes, Kamachi loves to introduce weird and complex themes and moments in the story, as that's just his style. There is a reason why so many regard him as a mad genius. While the current part of Index Genesis Testament feels like it's taking more of an OT style of plot progression by having more build-up than NT, don't get me wrong, there does feel like there is a direction for where the story is heading, and the arcs do feel more interconnected. Just that it probably doesn't feel as predictable as Ophanus trying to get her evil plan completed if we compare it to early NT. But who knows, we might see a more climactic evolution of the story very soon. As I may have implied, Index is by no means perfect. I don't believe any story truly is, apart from Shrek 2. Since perfection in storytelling and art is impossible in my opinion, I still regard Index as a masterpiece in spite of its flaws, because I think the positives are so huge that I really don't care about the negatives. It just has a special place in my heart, which is why I regard it so highly. But I don't want to act like the flaws don't exist, so let's talk. With it being a harem light novel from the early 2000s, it does have some fan service in nearly every volume, with very few exceptions, and it can be rather irritating to read at times. What's even more annoying is that it's kinda hard to recommend this series to your average normie simply because of the goddamn fan service. I mean, once you become an Index veteran, you get used to it, but still, I really don't think Index even needs fan service at all, apart from a few situations where it is actually used in a clever way, like Oriana using her sex appeal to her advantage in fights. And not gonna lie, if you have a short attention span, you might struggle reading Index. Often Kamachi's pacing can be quite slow at the start of the typical Index volume, where it takes until chapter 3 where the story finally gets exciting. That combined with complicated magic terminology, info dumps, and diplomatic meetings is probably off-putting. I honestly think it adds a lot of lore and depth to the story, so I personally like how Kamachi implements it. It makes revisiting this series so rewarding, when you notice subtle hints concerning future events, or when you finally do understand the complex magic jargon. You don't need to be an expert on quantum physics or the occult to enjoy Index, but it certainly does enhance the reading experience if you do. The fact that Index can be enjoyed at a range of levels for a variety of reasons makes it truly special. Maybe you just like the power scaling and the epic fights, maybe you are a physics or history geek, maybe you read it just to see your favourite character interact with others. There is so much you can appreciate in this series, it's insane. Back to the flaws though, Kamachi in some volumes likes to switch between characters a lot. You're about to read this epic fight, and then psych, the next page gets switched to another character touching grass or whatever. It's a pet peeve, and I understand why it's written like that. It makes the story less linear by combining it with multiple characters and situations occurring simultaneously. So again, I do actually like how Kamachi writes this majority of the time, as it does keep the plot refreshing, even if it can be a nuisance when I want to read what's about to happen next, only for the story to shift to something completely unrelated. I want to mention about the fights in Index, as they do deserve a lot of credit, but I'll try not to go on for too long. The fights in Index aren't about who can summon the bigger Biju bomb or has the most Senju DNA. Like Part 1 of Naruto, they usually involve tactics, strategy, and using the environment around the characters to gain the upper hand. I'd say they are pretty similar also to how JoJo fights are fought, but maybe more fast-paced. As Toma is limited to one trump card most of the time, he has to use other factors around him to compensate for being a one-trick pony. He does have some other source beyond Imagine Breaker, but it's a pretty stupid idea to cut off his right arm, which triggers his trap card. While my description of the fights may seem boring, if there are no shonen training arcs or a lot of power-ups, the variety of enemies keeps it refreshing, so there's no need to rely on these typical shonen tropes in Index. And you do get to see other characters fight too, with their own unique abilities based upon real-life concepts, such as quantum physics with espers, or the occult and religion with magicians. I go into way more detail about why Index's power system is so awesome in this video, so you can check that out where I explain it in more detail. What I also adore about the fights is that they provide the opportunity for the morals of the different characters to clash, as it not only becomes a physical battle, but a philosophical battle too. At times, it's like two Greek philosophers beating the hell out of each other. And yes, Toma's wisdom is on par with Socrates. A common critique of Index is that there are way too many characters, and the author forgets all the old cool ones in favour for new faces. That a lot of the cast feel like bland anime stereotypes personified that feels outdated as a result. Listen, I'm not gonna deny that Index was heavily influenced by typical anime tropes like tsunderes, wannabe heroes, and other harem series. But it did actually influence a lot of tropes itself for a series that first released in 2004. The reason why magical harem anime became so popular was largely due to the success of Index, and the trope of the main character being a low rank on paper but having a busted power also can be credited to the series. Nevertheless, Index nails characters for the type of story it is, and I honestly believe there is a character in Index for everyone due to the wide range of personalities in its universe. The three main protagonists of Index are Kamijo Toma, Accelerator, and Hamazura Shiage, known as the Three Heroes. Toma is the more idealistic of the two, with his obsessive hero complex, where he assumes the identity of who he believes Kamijo Toma truly is after he lost his memories. Believing by saving so many people and being as selfless as possible, Toma believes he can be what he deems to be the best person he can be. Toma isn't just a generic good guy despite how he acts. His obsession with being the hero is often at the detriment of himself, and is quite an unhealthy mindset, even if he is the moral force of what is good in this story. Toma is by no means perfect or a Gary Stew. He has obvious flaws, like when he lied to Index about his memories still being intact in order to make her happy, a decision which is later exploited as a weakness against him by Fuyama of the Right, the main villain of the original light novel. Toma's character development is a lot more subtle than the other main characters, as his purpose is to serve as a vehicle for others to develop off him thanks to his actions rather than outright changing himself. I mean, he does change in a nuanced way during New Testament, as he learns to rely more on others and that being selfish isn't always a bad thing. I honestly do like that his character doesn't have to have a complete 180 shift for development, as everyone doesn't need to be like Accelerator in the story. Otherwise, such a drastic change no longer has the same impact if you just repeat it over and over again. Toma remains a unique protagonist as a result. Speaking of Accelerator, he is by far one of the best characters I have ever come across. No cap. Introduced as a seemingly merciless and sadistic villain, it's revealed he was manipulated and coerced into killing thousands of clones that he did not regard as real human beings. His path of redemption is nothing short of mesmerizing. He still views himself as a villain who can never be a hero, but wishes more than anything to atone for what he's done and looks up to Toma as someone he wishes he could be. It's not as simple as saying Accelerator becomes a good guy. He fights back and forth between the darkness inside him, embracing others close to him as the family he never had, and yet turns away from them, believing that a monster like him is best suited away from that life of happiness. Eventually, he learns that he can be the person he wants to be, despite what happened in the past. Those sins will never go away, and yet Accelerator finally embraces those close to him. What Accelerator wants more than anything is to be accepted by others and have a loving family. Truly, his character arc is one of the best things about Index's story. Hamazura's character is somewhat in the middle of Toma and Accelerator. He is morally grey and also started off as an antagonist like Accelerator, but at the same time he is an underdog like Toma. Hamazura represents the unlikely hero, basically the guy who should have been a nameless background character elevated to something much greater, with absolutely no power other than his quick wit and luck. Yes, Hamazura can be accused of having plot armor due to some of the crazy situations he survives and somehow gets away with. But if we focus solely on his character, Hamazura is basically the Han Solo or Finn of Index. Someone who is not the chosen one, just an average crook off the street who finds himself thrown into an insane and dangerous situation, where he becomes a better human being for the girl he loves. He had a preconceived notion of who he was, a weak level 0 who is treated as worthless by society, and yet Toma was the one who showed that his mindset was flawed, that Hamazura was victimizing himself and blaming the system for his own failures and insecurities. Damn, that sounds like a pretty relevant message if you ask me. So the main characters all sound well and good, but what about the side characters? Surely they all can't be well written too. Honestly, considering the amount of characters Index has, I think it does an incredible job with writing its characters. The main heroines like Misaka and Index both have moments to shine, even if they aren't always the front and center of the plot. Index may seem like an annoying character renowned for her gags, but she actually has a deeper purpose. I mean, you'd hope so considering the series is named after her. She was treated like an object by the Anglican Church, as a walking, talking library. She was only valued as a human being by her friends, who she forgot due to her memory being erased. It took Toma to accept her as a person, to not give up on her, to break the endless cycle of the memory wipes. But as a result, Toma loses his own memories in her place due to the selfless action he took. It's poetry. Even if you take the lesser known side characters or villains like Aureolus Izzard, Yamisaka Oma, Carissa, etc., they all have their unique morals, and what they believe they are doing is right. It's one of the reasons why the antagonists in Index are so great. they actually feel like human beings with flaws and are convinced they are doing the right thing. And with most of them returning to the story with a changed worldview, it shows that they can develop as a result of their fights. It's crazy when even one-volume side characters have so much depth to them. While new characters keep getting introduced, I can safely say that almost every character introduced has an opportunity or arc to shine, even if they are relegated to the background afterwards. I don't think it's right to ignore the stories that made the reader want to see more of them to begin with. Kamachi introduces new characters and stories in the favour of the world building at play. He is constantly looking to expand the nature of the universe he has created, which means introducing different factions and individuals. That doesn't always imply that old characters can't make a return, just that his approach favours the new, with the exception of the main cast, because they're always going to be there. And honestly, I'm all in favour of doing this, as Index prioritises its world above all. Even if you include all the characters introduced in OT. It will be an impossible job giving them all new moments to shine without neglecting the amazing new characters that show up in NT. And I honestly believe that's why Index has remained fresh and new to me despite it going on for so long. If it was simply repeating the same characters and story beats from OT without experimenting with new characters and themes, I think it'd be fair to say that Index would lose its charm. Although one flaw off the top of my head in regards to the characters is that there isn't really any major character deaths that occur, which can leave parts of the story and certain battles and fights feeling like they have a severe lack of consequences or stakes. Admittedly, keeping characters alive allows the opportunity for further development, but it can result in characters overstaying their welcome when they are seemingly kept alive for no reason. I won't be able to cover every single theme that occurs in Index, as this video is probably too long as it is. Nevertheless, the obvious theme of Index is that of heroism, about self-sacrificing and trying to be the best person you can be. It's a relevant message that I still think about to this day. And it just goes to show, you don't need a superhero costume or a cape to write a convincing story about heroes, as Index teaches you that you don't need to be special or the strongest to make a positive impact in the lives of those who surround you. Making the right decisions in life is often very hard, as we as humans are all flawed. We are sometimes misguided in our beliefs to try and make the world a better place, blinded by our own ideology, or willing to make harmful shortcuts for the greater good. Often the line between good and evil is so blurred that it can result in a moral dilemma. In classical stories, there is often a clear sense of who or what is good and what is evil, but reality can be quite different due to how flawed human nature truly is. While you and I may have a preconceived notion of what is right or wrong from birth, there are individuals out there who will justify doing some really messed up stuff and are completely under the impression they are doing the right thing, which is a scary thought. While Toma acts as the benevolent moral compass of Index, as he is on the side of good, it doesn't mean every decision he makes is right and he is perfect, because he's not. And while his enemies may hurt and endanger others, they do it for what they believe will result in a better world. As revealed in Toma's final fight versus Fuyama in Old Testament, Toma is concentrated on helping the individual. He wants to save others on a case-by-case basis, doing simple actions with no ulterior motive or ultimate final plan. And Toma expects nothing in return, as opposed to Fuyama, who, like Toma, does want to save others, but in a drastically different way. Fuyama believes the world is corrupt and rotten, and that he is the chosen messiah who will fix it. He does not view people as individuals. He collectivizes others into groups, by believing he can wipe out the malice of mankind by recreating Noah's flood, killing most people on Earth, so what is left of humanity can live in peace and without suffering. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And it is often the case with society that we lump groups of people as opposed to judging them off their individual selves. There are obvious themes like one of redemption with Accelerator's character, which also ties into morality and what it means to be a hero, but one underrated theme of Index that is often overlooked and always seems to pop up in the series, is how nothing on the surface is what it actually seems. It ties in with the many mysteries of the series. Toma is a great example, as his right arm actually has something sealed within. Or Academy City appearing as a city of science when its true nature is something much more. I think this may be an allegory for how often people tend to absorb information at face value, without attempting to understand what we learn at a deeper or fundamental level, which then allows us to be manipulated as a result. And obviously, there is the theme about the contrast between science and religion. Index is so great that it doesn't portray either one as entirely good or bad, as both can be used in immoral ways by evil individuals who take advantage of others. Whether it is Fiamma of the Right, who uses his position as a religious dictator to start World War III for his own selfish plan, or the scientists who use their positions as experts to deceive vulnerable individuals. And yet both can be forces of good, with religion acting as a belief system which can benefit people's lives forever, and the role of science allowing us to try and understand how the universe functions at its core. It does raise interesting questions about science and religion. Are they truly incompatible? Science is often regarded as an absolute truth, despite the fact it is constantly changing and we are learning new things. Sometimes we do regard things as fact, when simply there is nothing out there that we know of which can possibly disprove it. Could science be classed as a belief system of sorts? And while believing in an outdated religious text may seem illogical as it can't truly be proven, is there no value in believing in something greater in what we can observe in the material world? I will end this segment with a passage from NT Volume 18. Modern science had robbed the occult of its legitimacy, made scientific investigation and examinations the symbol of correctness, won the position of widespread acceptance, and spread a mentality akin to science worship, in which the scientific was considered correct and the data was considered absolute. Index to me is a series I've followed for so many years now. I've turned into an old ass weeb. Admittedly, I don't really follow any other series in the anime sphere as religiously as I do with Toaru, which is the name of the franchise which Index is a part of. But why is that? Maybe the biblical themes have got to my head. As for me, Index is a series where I always want to follow Toma's next adventure. I have this childlike curiosity inside me where I want to know more about this fascinating world. I honestly enjoy seeing stupidly overpowered abilities clash against one another. And of course, I want to see all the unresolved mysteries finally explained. With the world of Index infinitely expanding with the main series and all its side stories and spin-offs, it truly makes me think more of it as an experience than a book series. I mean, it's not flawless, no series is. But what I think Index offers in terms of how unique it truly is, and the value you get from submerging yourself to this fascinating world, is like no other series I've ever encountered before. I think in the overall anime fandom, Index has this stigma to it, or a mixed reputation, overshadowed by the anime adaptation of its spin-off, and deemed as an outdated run-of-the-mill harem ecchi series by general anime fans. I don't want to be the guy that gatekeeps Index and says the novel should stay underrated and have a small but crazy cult following forever. Nor do I stupidly ever want it or believe it will ever be as popular as some of the bigger anime IPs out there. I'm just an average fan of the series who went into the books with the lowest expectations and came out as an absolute fanatic who must spread the holy gospel at every opportunity. I hope this video will serve as a means to show many others why Index is so great and deserves far more love and attention than what it gets. Because to me, A Certain Magical Index is a misunderstood masterpiece. It would honestly mean the world to me if you share this video with others if you want to get them into the series or to convince them that Index is far better than what they may think. Thank you for 25k subs and for watching, and I'll see you all next time.